for the BPM Change Management PRR Review Monthly Meeting. My name is Nicole Hines, representing the ISO Customer Readiness, and I will be facilitating today's web conference. Today's call is being recorded. These recordings are for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcripts should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. As a reminder, these monthly calls are structured to stimulate an honest dialogue and engage in different perspectives. And while we welcome comments and questions, please remember to keep comments professional and respectful. We will be taking questions throughout the call today. If you are dialed in directly by phone only and not on the WebEx, you can enter the question queue at any time by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. If you are connected through your audio through the WebEx platform, please use the raise hand feature located above the chat box on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Please introduce yourself before asking your question. If you need technical assistance during the call today, please send a chat message to the event producer. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the proposed revision requests that are in the initial or recommendation stage of the process. We will be discussing 8 PRRs today. 5 of them are in the initial stage, 3 are in the recommendation stage. 7 PRRs were submitted by the ISO and 1 was submitted by SRP. The business practice manual purpose is to set forth business practice manuals that implement the ISO tariffs. The ISO conducts the yearly policy initiative roadmap process to consider and rank initiatives. Policy changes submitted through the PRR process will be referred to the policy initiative roadmap, and each subject area in the BPM is based on enabling language in the ISO tariff. The PRR process cannot be used to introduce changes that are not supported by existing tariff authority. Our first BPM we're talking about today is the metering BPM. PRR 1448 is the hybrid metering requirements in the initial stage, and I will hand that over to Priyanka to discuss.
Good morning, this is Priyanka Namburi from California ISO. We have submitted PRR 1448 for the hybrid phase 2A metering requirements. With this initiative, we will be requiring a component level meter data. So that requirement is added to metering BPM. We have not received any initial comments, and the comment period has expired on June 19th, 2022. The next step is to post the recommendation.
Thanks, Priyanka. Are there any questions on this PRR? All right, moving on. The next BPM we're going to be discussing is the demand response. PRR 1444, monitoring data clarification, is in the recommendation stage, and I'm going to hand this over to Elaine to discuss.
Thank you, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. PRR 1444 is to provide clarity on monitoring data as it applies to demand response. This PRR is to better define the timeline in which the monitoring data is due, as well as sanctions that could be applied if the monitoring data is not submitted timely. We did receive some comments from Pacific Gas and Electric, as well as Southern Cal Edison. Those questions were with regard to whether sanctions will be applied on a DRP ID basis or a resource ID basis. We've concluded that these sanctions will be applied on a resource ID basis, and I've invited David Slotlow from our legal team to address any concerns or questions that might come up. Do we have any questions?
As a reminder, if you're on audio only, you can select #2 to enter the question queue. If you are dialed in via the WebEx, please use the raise hand icon in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. All right, thanks, Elaine. The next the BPM that we're going to be discussing is the reliability requirement. PRR 1447 is removal of references to reserve sharing in the initial stage. And PRR 1443 is the 2023 availability assessment hours in the recommendation stage. I will hand that over to Melanie to discuss these PRRs.
So the first PRR is PRRR 1447, which is removal of references for reserve sharing. The reason for this revision was references to reserve sharing LFEs were previously removed from Section 40 of the tariff. This revision just removed these references from the RRBPM to match the tariff. There are no comments at this time. Next step is to post recommendation. And then next PRR is 1443, which is the 2023 availability assessment hours. The reason for this revision was to add the availability assessment hours for 2023. And the next step is to post final decision. Are there any questions on these PRRs?
Thanks, Melanie. The next two BPMs are the market operations BPM and the market instruments. I'll hand that over to Michael to discuss both of these BPMs. The first PRR is 1445 with updates to the list of acceptable use limitations and clarifications to the calculation of opportunity cost adders for use limited resources. And this is in the initial stage. Michael?
Good morning, Michael Martin representing operations. Yes, 1445 updates the list of acceptable use limitations. So we did receive comments from Southern California Edison. The clarifications were on what you can use to demonstrate you're a use limited resource, such as a design reason. Edison asked if a contract reason would qualify. We responded that sure, if it's properly documented, that could meet the spirit of this PRR. We didn't receive any other comments, and at this point, we are at the point to post a recommendation. So on the market instruments side, starting with 1446, 1446 is the counterpart to 1445, updates some specific details on use limitations and how the opportunity cost adders are applied. The bulk of the changes are, again, back in the market operations BPM. We didn't receive any comments on this BPM change, and at this point it is ready to post a recommendation. So for PRR 1442, allowing bidding of negative pump costs, this is a specific situation where negative pump costs bidding may be desired, such as overgen. This is when you bid a negative pump cost, you're indicating that you're willing to get paid the bid value for the energy that's required to run the pump. And this was submitted as an emergency PRR effective 5/31, which we notified individually SCs interested and affected by this. And we didn't receive any comments through the BPM process. And at this point, we're ready to post the final decision.
Michael, are there any questions on these three PRRs? All right. The final BPM is our settlements and billing BPM. PRR 1437 updates to the BPM for the new settlements timeline is in the initial stage. This was the PRR that was submitted by SRP. We had it in a holding status for the last couple of meetings, and I'll hand it over to Matthew to discuss where we are with this PRR. Matthew?
Thank you, Nicole. Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Amati, and I'll be going over settlements PRR. PRR 1437 was submitted by SRP, and the change here is the current BPM needs to reflect current settlement timeline to allow entities to properly validate relevant settlement statements. The initial comment period expired on July 19th, and our next step is post recommendations. Any questions?
As a reminder, you can hit #2 if you're dialed in by telephone, or raise your hand in the lower right-hand corner of the WebEx if you have any questions. All right, thanks, Matthew. That is all of the PRRs you're going to discuss today. Our next BPM PRR monthly review meeting will be on August 23rd at 11 a.m. If you have any questions or concerns, please email us at bpm_cm@cliso.com. And that is the end of our call today. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great day.